Hi there, it's Lee here again, and I'm here to share with you the fact that you're probably not doing everything that you think you are doing. So the title of the video here is all about the conscious versus the unconscious mind, and it's a bit of a woo-woo subject for want of a better term, but I wanted to cover this off and make sure that, if you're watching this video, if you're understanding what I'm talking about, that you really understand the difference between this, because it's such an important part of how we live our lives. So who am I to tell you this? Well, I'm Lee, as I've mentioned. I have a success and fulfillment program that I run people through, and it's all about making sure that you're living the most successful and the most fulfilled life, and that you're doing it today and not just tomorrow and building for tomorrow. So there's a balance that we have to have. But a big part of that is obviously our mindset. Now, the program's based on a few different things, and one of the big aspects of it that I really focus on is that mindset. It's understanding why you're doing what you're doing and the reasons behind it all. But there's this distinction that needs to be made about what we do consciously and what we do unconsciously. So just to start with that aspect of it, there is a statistic out there. I did do a bit of research before I came on, just so I had the right bit of information. So every single day we are bombarded with millions upon millions upon millions, into the billions, and God knows beyond that, to be honest, bits of information that we have to process. Now, every second, the statistic is, I'm just going to double check it, I've still got it open here. So every second, the brain is processing around about 11 million bits of information. So I'm just going to leave that out there at 11 million bits of information. So 11 discrete, distinct pieces of information that we have to process. Logically, we cannot process all of that. Our brains are a computer, but when you're thinking, are you thinking about 11 million different things at this moment in time as you're watching this video? The answer is no. So in reality, what we're actually doing consciously is we're actually processing around about 40 to 50 bits of conscious information. So that's the statistic. And this is just from a bit of research that was done quite recently. It was within the last year, but it has been around for quite a while as this kind of stream of information, shall we say. But if you look at that distinction there, we have 11 million bits, I'm saying it again, of information that is bombarding our brains, and our brains is processing that information. I mean, we're doubtlessly, bombarded by more than the 11 million bits, but that's what our actual brains are processing on a regular basis every single second. But consciously, we can only be aware of 40 to 50 bits. That is a huge, huge, huge gap. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that we're running very largely autonomously. And this is what we're talking about when we speak about the conscious mind versus the unconscious mind. So we cannot consciously process all of the information that is being thrown at us on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on the second to second basis. We just cannot do that, not consciously. So we are doing it unconsciously, and this is where that distinction comes from. But to do it unconsciously, that means that we are not aware of what we're reacting to. We're not aware of what we're processing at that moment in time. And I really hope this message is coming across clear, because it becomes relevant when it comes down to how you approach situations, how you approach the people around you, how you approach your business when you're running a business, how you approach the clients, your customers, your suppliers, the people you network with, your family, your friends, your relationship partners. There is so much information out there that we just react to unconsciously. Now, how do we do that? Well, this is often where people unfortunately have, potential mental health issues, but just general triggers is what we call it. So this is more of an NLP terminology here. Now, a trigger is very much something, and it's used again in therapy, where you have an autonomous response to something. So when you have been in your formative years, and again, I should have rolled this one up, but the statistic there is generally our formative years last until we're around about 7-8 years old. After that, we're just, unless we consciously make a change, reprocessing information using the learned models and mechanisms that we established up to that point. So again, if you think about it, if your formative years are a bit disturbing, and unfortunately a lot of children do have unhappy childhoods these days, what that leaves you with is maybe traumatic experience, but generally it can be qualified as trauma. But we have these autonomous reactions, autonomous ways of thinking built into our brains at that point. We're hardwired to think in a certain way, is the argument there. Now, what that means is then, as we grow, as we develop, as we get older, we carry forward what these responses are, and they're our triggers. So we have certain things that will happen, certain events that will happen in our lives, and because of the autonomy in our brains, in our mindsets, they will trigger an automatic reaction. Now, my background is IT. I've been a programmer for many, many years. So I know how this works from a logical perspective. You know, it's cause and effect. You program something to do something, and it will have a hopefully intended outcome, a desired outcome. Again, there's more to it than that, but very simply put, if you do perform a certain action, you would generally expect a certain reaction from that. And once you have that established and it happens on a repetitive basis, that becomes an automatic process. And it's the same thing with how we learn, how we live, and how we grow, and certainly how we form ourselves in those formative years. We have these events happen to us, we respond and react to them, or other people respond and react to us. And that forms the basis of how we interpret and by default understand these things. So those events, those types of actions are what we call the triggers, and then we respond to them in an autonomous way. And that's the unconscious mind at work. A very basic example of this, and this is just, this is human instinct, this is basic survival, but you think about your breathing. How often do you recognize you're breathing in and you're breathing out? This happens automatically. It's something that we do by default as human beings, and any animal that breathes does this essentially autonomously. It's not something we have to think about doing. It's an automatic reaction. And that is just, that trigger there is that we're triggered to survive. That is why we're breathing in and breathing out. We need oxygen to survive. We need oxygen to develop ourselves. Now, that's a very basic example, but this extends to so many other aspects of our lives, and it's important to notice it. And again, I'm going to stick with this example of breathing because it's become a lot more popular in recent years, and that's for a very good reason. Because when people are talking about things such as meditation, which do have profound impacts on people's well-being, there is a reason why a lot of meditation is focused around breathing. And it can be just that breathing in a controlled manner is a very, very effective way of bringing back conscious thought to your breathing. And because you're taking over that autonomous action, you're focusing on just that one thing, and it becomes a bit more of a mindful event that you're undertaking. And this is where the whole term of mindfulness comes in. And a very basic example of this is what we call square breathing. So this would be where you take a breath and you breathe in for 2 to 4 seconds. And then for whatever the number of seconds you've breathed in for, you would hold it for that same number. So let's say 4. So you would breathe in for 4 seconds, you would hold it for 4 seconds, you would breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you would hold it again for 4 seconds, and then you just repeat the cycle. That is a very, very basic meditation, but by doing that, you're putting your full focus and attention on the breathing, but you're also overruling the autonomy in your brain. And what that actually does is it stops your brain processing a lot of the other information that it would normally do, because you're having to force it to think about an action that is normally something that's just automatic. You're forcing it out of its comfort zone. Now, why am I really talking about this? Well, the reason being it is important to how we live. I'm not talking about breathing now, obviously that is important to how we live, but being conscious, being mindful, being present, these are all terms that are thrown around and people don't always understand them, unfortunately. And this is something that I'm really trying to help get the message out, help people understand, because the more present, the more conscious, and the more mindful you are of what you're doing on a daily basis, the more you can actually do with your life. So when you have an event that has happened in your formative years that leaves you with a bit of trauma, or that has left you reacting poorly to certain situations, maybe you get angry too quickly, maybe you get upset too quickly, maybe you run and hide from certain situations because you fear confrontation. And I'm not suggesting this is a negative thing. These are just what, the sort of examples of things that can happen to us. There's obviously positive ones as well. You could become overly jubilant at a very small win. And again, all of these scenarios, they actually are both positive and negative, because it's the reaction that we're focused on, but they do have an impact on ourselves and the world around us. But when we're being conscious, when we're thinking consciously, we can determine how we react to certain events. Now, if we're the sort of person that is maybe a bit shy and a bit introverted, that's actually myself, then it's a conscious effort to take yourself out of your comfort zone and go and talk to people. Whereas my unconscious response, if I'm in a group of people, would maybe just to shut down and not talk, because I'm shy, I'm reserved, and I'm maybe nervous about talking to people. Whatever it is for yourself, it'd be a similar thing. But by taking control of that, by becoming conscious and being aware of what's happening, you can actually get yourself out of your comfort zone. It doesn't have to even be uncomfortable. but you can then do the thing that you need to do. So let's take networking as example. So I'm going to do a separate video about this anyway, because it's such an important thing for developing ourselves and building connections. And certainly when you're in business, it's such a vital part of it, because you just have to constantly be meeting new people. It's how we develop. But if you are shy and reserved and introverted, you're not going to get the most out of networking, because there's no point in going to an event and, all right, a lot of it's on Zoom now, but the same thing can actually happen in essentially going and hiding in a corner. And if you go to a physical face-to-face event and you go stand in the corner and no one comes and talks to you, well, you're not going to get much out of that event, are you? The same thing can happen on Zoom. If you go online on Zoom, and so many people are still doing this, we should be used to it by now, but people are nervous, and I understand that. But if you go on a Zoom meeting call and you have no camera on and you don't unmute yourself and you don't participate, you're just someone in the background. You're that person in the corner again, so you're not going to get anything out of the networking event. However, if your purpose for being at that event is that you want to build new connections, maybe you're looking to meet someone new that you can work with, maybe you're looking to onboard clients, maybe you need help from someone. If you're hiding in that corner, you're not going to get it. But by being aware of how we are, I mean, we could just go and say, well, we've tried, we failed, I couldn't talk to people, I didn't know what to say, I was really nervous about, muting myself, I was really nervous about walking up to that person, introducing myself, I didn't know what to say. These are all stories that we tell ourselves that put ourselves down, and this is all driven by our unconscious triggers that are making us nervous and shy and introverted. But if you're aware of that, it doesn't make it go away, but you can take control of it. You can make it a conscious thing that our conscious response, should I say, to the event that's happening. So in that exact same scenario, you could go and say, well, you know what? I really need to talk to people because I'm here for a reason. I need to make the most of it. So yes, I acknowledge that I'm nervous. I acknowledge that I'm feeling shy and that I don't necessarily want to talk to people because I just don't know how they're going to react. Maybe it's a bit scary. I'm aware of that in myself, but I am going to do it because I'm here for a reason. I understand my reason behind doing this. And this is actually another big part of what I do with people. And it drives everything, really. It's understanding the reason behind everything, your purpose. And there is a separate video I did on that, so you can go and look that up. But it's a huge part of my program and how I work with people, because once you know that, not only does it give you drive and motivation, but it can help you overcome some of these triggers that are causing you to not do the things you need to do. You could have resistance against writing, social media posts. You could have resistance about going on video. You could have resistance about joining networking meetings. You could have resistance about meeting new people, speaking to someone about your product you're offering. All these different things we can have resistance to. But once we understand that there is a difference here in how our mind works, and you have a conscious brain and an unconscious brain, and again, there's a lot of different variations of this, and I probably will cover them at some point where we're talking about maybe our mammalian brains versus our human brains and the computer and all these kind of things. There's some very good resources about these, and I'm happy to recommend them. But the bottom line is, it boils down to what is conscious and what is unconscious. And the unconscious actually incorporates all of the survivalist mechanisms that we have just built into us by nature. But if all you're doing is acting unconsciously, if you are just going through life unconsciously, just reacting the way that you've always done, well, you're never going to progress. I'm sorry, but it's true. You're never going to be successful, and very likely you're not going to be fulfilled, because you're not going to really achieve what you want, because you're just going through the motions. You're just on autopilot. It's like when people talk about driving, and this is quite a frightening fact. There's a lot of people, if you're doing the same commute, obviously when we're not in the lockdown, but when you're doing a commute, you're going from your home to an office building, maybe you're working for an employer as this example, or you're going to your own office building. Because you do the same route on a daily basis, or on a regular basis at least, it can become an automatic habit. It's actually the same, taking it back a step further, when you learn to drive. When you're first learning to drive, it can be a bit scary. You're not sure what to do. You've got all these buttons and gear levers and sticks and wheels and all this kind of stuff that you've got to think about. And all that's just internal to the car. Never mind the things out on the road, the people out on the road, the other vehicles about. That's just operating your own vehicle. And there's all these things that are bombarding you. And people take time to learn this. And we all do it at our own speed, but this is why we take lessons and we get taught, because we don't know how to do that instinctively. But what then happens is, as you drive more and more, you build up your confidence, which is a big part of it. You learn how to operate a vehicle, you learn the rules of the road, and so forth and so on. But as you then progress, as you drive more and more and more, a lot of those actions become automatic. You don't have to go searching for a gear stick or which gear you're going into if it's a manual car. You don't have to go searching for the windscreen wipers and how to turn them on. You don't have to search for how to turn on the aircon or change the radio. These are automatic actions. And that's us reprogramming our brain to a degree and building in these new autonomy routines, which is absolutely doable. But we had to start consciously to do that. So going back to the prior example, which is a bit more of a frightening one, is when people are doing a regular commute on a regular basis, eventually it just beds in and it becomes autonomous. So if nothing is interrupting that, then it is just autonomous. And there'll be people, and you may well have done this yourself, where you just kind of arrive. You don't really know what you've done to get there. You've just left home and you've got to your destination because you do it all the time. And the roads, and because you're used to driving and you're used to maybe traffic lights and stop signs and all this kind of stuff, it's just automatic that you respond to these things. So you don't consciously know what you've done. The problem here then is when something happens that's a bit of a pattern interrupt, and again, probably do a video about this as a separate thing, but if something unusual happens, how do you react to that? So if you're on autopilot driving from home to work and a car pulls out in front of you, what do? Do you panic? Do you scream? Do you forget where your brake pedal is and slam into the side of them? All these different permutations, which is again quite frightening. I mean, that's a car. Imagine if that was a child or just someone crossing the road. Because it's an unusual activity and you're on autopilot, that can cause someone a lot of harm, and never mind yourself. And this is why we have to be conscious, because if you're just going through life, going through the motions on autopilot, you could cause other people harm, not intentionally, but you could be doing that, and you could be doing it to yourself, which is even more important. We don't want to be harming anyone, least of all ourselves. So being conscious is such a powerful skill to have, and it's something that we're never taught. If you're involved in personal development, then you will hear these things. You'll hear words like consciousness, mindfulness, being present. And they're all the same thing ultimately. It's about taking control of your mind and not acting autonomously, not acting in the unconscious brain. And I'm a big advocate for this. There's different ways of doing it. There are different ways to make yourself present, all of which I can help you with. And the unconscious mind itself, you can reprogram a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of things that we unfortunately have ingrained into us through our formative years. And if that is trauma, that is trauma. If it's something else, it's something else. But they're not all good. Some of them can be good habits well, I've said habits already, haven't I? But they can be good habits, they can be good triggers, they can be good responses, but some of them can obviously be quite negative and quite harmful in our latter years. Now, you can't unfortunately get rid of those things because generally speaking, they've happened, they're embedded, but what you can do is learn to not cope with them, but to be mindful and therefore be able to control them. And that isn't in the way of saying it's willpower of, I've gone through this particular event. Someone said something nasty to me and it's really upset me. And your default would be maybe to sit down and cry and sulk and not talk to anyone for the rest of the day. That's, maybe just something that happens to you. You can't really stop that because it's such an inbuilt thing. But what you can do is reprogram yourself and create new routines. So it's not about getting rid of the old one. That's something that we generally don't do. It's not about replacement. It's about developing something new, developing new habits that essentially override the ones that are there. And I could put this in programming terms, but I'm not going to, because I'm aware the audience is not always going to be programmatic. But the message here is that by consciously taking over our processes, our thought processes, our mindfulness, we can review how we actually respond to these events. We can overlay these new habits, these new routines, and it does take time. It's not just a one-trick pony. You can't just say, one day I've got upset or someone said something nasty to me and, they've said something nasty, I'm not going to get upset. That's not going to solve the problem overnight. It takes time. It's a repetitive thing. And, habits are there to be made and built. They don't just get created by a one-time event. So you have to keep at this sort of thing. And this is where having an accountability partner, someone who's supporting you, can help you with this. And this isn't just on the negative side. That does sound very downbeat, but it can obviously apply, and it does very much apply to building things that are for the positive. So if you're in business and you want to build more, you've got your goals, you want to scale more, you want higher profit, you want higher turnover, you want more staff, whatever it could be, you're setting goals. But if you don't have someone keeping you accountable or making sure you're continually moving towards that and building that habit to do so, chances are you may never achieve that. That's not everyone. Some people will. Some people are just stubborn. And, if that's you, then great, good luck to you. But most people do need that bit of support and that bit of help, which is where, people like myself come in. We're here to help. But the bottom line is that the key to it all is you have to become conscious. You have to be acting consciously. So that means understanding what you're doing on a daily basis, not just going through the motions. And yes, we do want to program certain things in that do become autonomous, because we don't want to have to think about how we breathe. We don't want to have to think about how we digest our food. We don't need to do that. You can do if you really want to, because there can be health benefits to these things. But again, I'm not an advocate for a lot of these, and it's not something I know a huge amount about, so I'm not going to pretend that I do. But there are stories out there of people who have that ability to do so, and it's fairly interesting if you do want to look it up. But you can have a look at the things that you want to make a change to, whether that's taking over your business and making changes to it, or changing your processes, your procedures, changing your routines personally, or maybe getting up earlier out of bed, going to the gym in the morning rather than an evening, going to the gym at all, eating a better diet, doing it all consciously. So you absolutely can do this, and I guess this is my underlying message, and where I'm going to leave it is that we have these two minds. We have our conscious minds and we have our unconscious minds as well. We cannot get rid of one or the other. They both exist. The point really is, where are you going to leave your focus? Are you going to let your unconscious brain just rule your life and just go through the motions the way you've always done so? There's nothing wrong with that if that is how you want to live. But if you really want to achieve, if you want to be successful, if you want the things that are going to give you fulfillment, like I said, not just in the future, but today, you need to become more conscious. You need to really look at what you're doing in your life, in your business, on a day-to-day basis. Now, as I've said before, if this is something you need help with or you want to discuss further, by all means get in touch. This is really what I'm setting myself up to do, to really help people with this, and I am doing so. So I'm here to help. But even just this information, just think on it. Do a bit of research yourself. There are plenty of resources out there, as I've already mentioned. So if you want to go and find them, or if you want some recommendations, come and ask me, and I will send you plenty. I'll be putting some out as I go through, putting more content out. But the point is here, if you really want to make more of your life, you want to do more with your life, you want to make changes, you want to make more achievements, create more success, then you really need to start thinking more mindfully about what you're doing on a regular basis. So I will leave it there. I've been talking for a while on that. I really hope that's been helpful, maybe enlightening to you. Would love the feedback. If you have any, just absolutely let me know. If it has been helpful, if you feel you need any help though, or you need to do more in the future, you need a bit of guidance on this, or you want to understand how doing this can actually help you in your life and your business, then just leave me a comment, send me a direct message, however you want to do it, and I'm here to help. So I'll leave it for now, and I'll see you next time.